This is a really bad time to be figuring out what my arrow setup should be for this phone. Stupid mosquitoes. But, you know, better late than never, you know? So last season I was shooting roughly a 380 grain arrow setup. For white-tailed deer, that is not very heavy, and it's kind of scary. My buck last year, I only got one long of penetration. Fortunately, I did see the deer fall over and die, and I was able to recover it. But it was a little scary because I hardly got any penetration. So my brother got the Ranch Fairy arrow test kit. He got the inserts and field tips. He didn't get the arrows because we already both of us shoot gold tip arrows, so we decided to go with gold tip for the test. But I'm thinking about actually getting the full Serious Archery test kit from Serious Archery. Now what I'm doing right now is I'm trying to tune my bow. Earlier today I did some paper tuning and I was shooting some of these guys right here, and I could not tune the thing for the life of me. So right now I'm out here, I'm gonna try to do some knock tuning to see if I can get them to shoot a little better, and I'm gonna see if they go in plumb at around 10, 20 yards. So right now what we have here is we have a 250 spine with a 100 grain insert and a 300 grain tip. We're gonna shoot this one first just to see how it does. I'm not necessarily trying to tune it yet. Paper tuned, they shot horrible, but we're gonna try from 10 yards to see how they do. We're gonna shoot at that upper bail. Okay, now that arrow went in completely sideways. So we know that that's not a good one. So now that I shot one arrow, just to get a feel, we know how it's working. And that one, still sideways, but not as bad as the other one. We're gonna shoot this arrow again. We're gonna turn this guy clockwise. I'm gonna keep knock tuning. I'll get back to you when I come up with some results. So I ran through all of the 250 spine and I shot the 150, 200, 225, 250, 275, and 300 grain field tips on all of them. And I did a little bit of knock tuning, but none of them are, they're all consistently kicking the same direction. So first off, none of them are shooting right. None of them are working right. Now, what I discovered when I was paper tuning earlier, that even my current setup, my 340 spine right here, this current setup, even with fletching, is kicking the same direction that all the other arrows are. So that tells me that the bow is just out of tune. So I ran through all the 300 spine ones with all the different tips, and I keep coming to the same conclusion. So here's what we're doing. Right where I'm standing, this is straight on right here, but as you can see, they are all kicking that way. And even my 340 spine, my current setup, is doing the same thing. Obviously not to the extent that all these are, but it is doing it. I don't really know. I guess getting it tuned is the right thing to do. The only problem is if I go into the shop and have them tune it, what they're gonna do is they're gonna tune the bow to the arrow. They're gonna make the bow fling this arrow setup the right way. And I don't want that. I want this bow to be all square. That means, you know, the cams, the limbs, and the rest, the string, everything lined up perfect. And then figure out which arrow setup works best for the bow. So I want to tune the arrow to the bow, not the bow to the arrow. I want the bow performing normally, like a normally function square bow, and then tweak the arrow, because tweaking the arrow is a little bit easier. I can just swap out tips, inserts, knock tune it, stuff like that, instead of having to go in to a shop and find someone with a bow press to do a bunch of mechanical things that I have no idea what's going on with. So that's my predicament. Okay, so this is what I was trying to do. I was trying to set up a heavy arrow setup. For those of you that don't know, a heavy arrow setup is exactly what it sounds like. It's a heavy arrow setup. My current arrow setup is a Hunter XT 340 spine with a standard aluminum insert and a 100 grain tip. The problem with this setup is this setup right here is only around 370 grains. Some of you might be like, well, why does that matter? Well, 370 grains, let's just say, is not a very heavy setup and is not the right thing for white-tailed deer. And you're probably like, dude, you shot a deer with it last year. Well, why are you trying to change? True, I did shoot a deer with this setup, 340 spine, 100 grain why not all that?
The problem is I only got one lung and I didn't really have a blood trail.
So basically this year, my goal was to build a heavy arrow setup. For some reason, I didn't do that the other 9 months of off season. That I don't know what I was doing. I just, for some reason, waited till now to try to set up this heavy arrow setup, which is a problem. Hunting season doesn't start this weekend, but next weekend. A week from when this video comes out is when deer season starts. Let me just give you a quick rundown of what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to build a heavy arrow setup. So that is a really stiff spine, which is like either 300, 250, or 200. Then there's a 100 grain insert, and then either a 125 to 300 grain broadhead, depending on which one I can try to get to tune. Now, the whole thing that I was trying to do in the video, as you could see, I was trying to do bare shaft tune. That means I was trying to find an arrow and a certain weight setup and spine setup that shot perfectly straight without fletching. Problem was, as you saw in the video, they were all going the same direction and none of them were flying straight. Come to realize that my bow was out of square. It wasn't square, meaning that my string and cams weren't lining up with the middle of my rest. So after all this fiasco that I was dealing with, I came back to the house and I did some more tuning over the next couple days for like 2 or 3 hours, and I got my bow sort of tuned correctly. But still not 100%. But I was able to find an arrow setup that shot an almost perfect bullet hole through paper. The setup that I was able to get to shoot relatively straight was a 250 spine arrow with a 100 grain insert and a 150 grain tip. That puts my arrow setup at around 560 grains roughly, which is almost 200 grains more than this setup. Definitely a huge win. Plus you throw on a fixed blade broadhead and the super high FOC that it is, it'll probably get some pretty good penetration and we'll probably get pass-throughs, which is exciting. Now, I wanted personally something over 600, but I couldn't do that because, well, I just couldn't find anything that tuned right. Now, the test kit that I was using was my brother's. And the reason that's important, because his arrows were actually 2 inches longer than what they should have been for my specs. So basically, I was using his test kit, but I wasn't getting an accurate reading because they weren't my length arrows. 2, he did not have a 200 spine arrow, which means I probably could have found a higher weight combination, but 250 spine was the lowest it went. And for my bow, the Matthews bow, 70 pounds, a lot of energy, 250 spine, probably just a little too flimsy, which is why I couldn't get the super, super heavy stuff to fly right. Now the setup that I found, like I said, 250 spine, 100 grain insert, 150 grain broadhead, I was able to get an almost perfect bullet hole. Not quite, there was a little tear, but I can work with that because you can do some knock tuning and then put fletching on and it should fly very straight, very true, which is exciting. Now, put all that aside. Because this was my brother's test kit and it wasn't designed specifically for me, basically all that testing I did was for nothing, but not quite. After doing all that testing, I was able to get my bow somewhat in tune, which is a good thing. Come to think of it, that's really the only thing I accomplished. So moving on, what I did is I bought a test kit for myself, but this time I got the arrows cut to the correct length. I ordered a 200/250 spine. So it comes with 2 250 spine arrows and 2 200 spine arrows, which means I should be able to get an even heavier arrow setup because I have a 200 spine, which is an even stiffer and heavier arrow, and I should be able to put some more weight on the front. Hopefully, we'll see. Maybe, maybe not. Hopefully the test kit comes in time because I only have like a week and a half until deer season starts, and I'd like to have this heavy arrow setup figured out before deer season starts. Anyway, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like. That helps us out a lot. If you want to subscribe, remember that's an option. If you want to check out the gear that I use, there's links in the description. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one.